It seems like every year people love to complain about the video game industry. While it is true that there has been a lot of problems in the video game industry with massive layoffs, massive, strikes going on because of the AI and the art being used now, there's still some good in there. And that's definitely one of the great things about this. This has been a good year for gaming. Hello everyone, Kingdom Kid here with my top 10 games of 2024. Like I already said, this was a good year for video games with a lot of anticipated titles, a lot of anticipated sequels, some remakes, and some surprises along the way as well. And definitely one of the things that really helped out on this was the indies. I do have a couple of those on this list, but there are definitely a couple that I didn't even play, and I'll talk about those later. If you are unfamiliar how I do my top 10 games, this is how I usually do it. Number 1, the game obviously had to be released in the year 2025. There you go. It also can't be a remake or a remaster of a game that has already been out in this country before. For example, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not going to be on this list because it is technically a retelling of a previous game that's been out before, even though there has been some changes going on, but the general theme is still the same. Number 3, I obviously had to beat the game, see credits, and, see not everything that the game had to offer, but from like the start of the game to the end of like the main story is usually how I do it. Like I said, there's been a lot of games that came out this year, and it was kind of hard to narrow down a top 10. There were a few games that came out that I was like, okay, this probably won't make my top 10 list or such, but then as I start whittling down the list, I was like, okay, what should and shouldn't be on the list? I always come across that problem, and 2025 is looking like it's going to be the same issue again. But without further ado, here are my top 10 games of 2024. Number 10, Tales of Kenzara Zao. This was a charm of a game. I'm going to be completely honest, this was a fun game. I remember the developer of this game announcing it at last year's Game Awards, and it really stuck out to me, and I've been following it ever since. There is a shame, however, that their studio did have to do some massive layouts or even close down. One or the other, or both, I can't remember. But this game was really fun. You play the main character, who is a shaman, and he has to deal with the loss of his father, and he's trying to go back to bring him back to life, and has to go through trials. But the thing about the main game is that it's actually a story written by the father of another character that you sometimes play as in the real world, who passed away as well. So it's definitely a game of loss and how one should deal with it, or not should deal with it, but how one can deal with it in, how to process the loss of a very important loved one, and loved ones in general, even if they weren't a big important person like your father or your mother. A loss of a parent is never easy, no matter when they are taken from you or how they are taken from you, and it's always going to stick with you. So this game has a really strong message, and the gameplay is really simplistic as well. You get some power-ups, and you can swap between specific powers from either the power of the moon or the power of the sun, and you get more power as you progress through the game. It's very Metroid-like in the way that you can only do some certain things in certain areas for a little bit, but then you get a power-up, so you can go back there and continue on collecting some of the collectibles, going through some of these challenge rooms where you get another type of a power-up or a health upgrade. And it was a really fun game, and I really did enjoy this game for what it was. And it's really fun, and it was free for PlayStation Plus members. I believe it might still be like that. I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely worth the buy regardless. It's a nice little fun game. You can easily beat it and complete it within 10 hours or less for sure. And it's a really nice game. And honestly, I really like the developer of this game and the person who was behind it as well, because it's a really strong message. So when people are complaining about like, oh, make your own games, and then they do that, and then people still complain, well, they don't really have a leg to stand on, in my opinion. But nonetheless, Tales of Kenzara Zao, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is my number 10 game of 2024. Number 9, Mario and Luigi Brothership. This is a game that actually came out very close to the end of the year, and it was fun as hell. I will say that. It was a fun little game, a really true 3D Mario and Luigi game, a return to the Mario and Luigi RPG style, which was a really fun style, in my opinion. Like I said, this is the first 3D style, and it's the first Mario and Luigi game that we've had in a long time. As a matter of fact, it's crazy that we've gotten all types of the Mario RPG games. We've gotten the Mario RPG, Super Mario RPG remake that came out late last year as well. And then we got the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remaster that came out earlier this year. And now we got the Mario and Luigi RPG as well in Brothership. Brothership is nothing too crazy in terms of story. You know, Mario and Luigi and the whole Mushroom Kingdom cast gets pulled into a new world where they have to help connect Concordia, and you're helped along the way of Connie and Little Snoutlet, who's not a pig, even though, well, he looks like a pig, on this big ship to, you know, connect the islands as a whole again and connect the whole world again. And this game's really nice, and it builds on the whole connections that people have, whether it be familiar bonds, friendly bonds, or just bonds in general. It's a nice little message like that. The combat is very similar to the Mario and Luigi combat, if you are familiar with that. However, there are some differences. Usually everything that you do with Luigi is B. However, to select the items or whatever you want to do as Luigi, you have to use A. But when it's time to execute them, then you use the B button, which is a little weird in my opinion, because there's always B no matter what, and then they changed it to that. Now, unlike the other Mario and Luigi games, you don't really control Luigi at all. In some aspects, you do control just Luigi, but when you're together with the bros, it's usually like, oh, I mean, you still have the whole press A to make Mario jump, press B to make Luigi jump, and then, you know, X to make Mario swing his hammer, Y for Luigi to swing his hammer. But there used to be a time where you could swap who was ever in the front, so you could, like, swap to have Luigi in the front and Mario in the back, and vice versa, or some such. And unfortunately, they don't let you do that. So the game is a little concise with that. In terms of the combat, like I said, is pretty nice. And then you get your bros attacks, which are special power moves that you have to use with both Mario and Luigi. And those are actually pretty fun. The one thing I will say, though, it does take a while for you to get your first bros attack, and then they are very spaced out throughout the entire game, which isn't so bad either, in my opinion. And how you get to the new areas as well is really kind of fun too. You get shot out of a cannon on the ship and go to the islands. Now, the islands themselves aren't really that long in terms of everything. They do take a while to complete in some aspects, but majority of the time it'll take you roughly maybe an hour, maybe a little less or a little more. Kind of depends on how you're all doing it to complete each island. And each island in the main hub subsection islands or whatever doesn't take that long either. And then once you get all the islands connected in one area, you go to the Grand Lighthouse and you go face a boss. So the bosses are also very spaced out as well in some aspects. I remember after you face the first lighthouse boss, then eventually you actually face another boss not too long after. So it's very like that in a way. It's still a fun and enjoyable game. I'd say it's a pretty good Mario and Luigi game. I know it's probably not going to end up being everyone's favorite one, but I still say it's well worth it if you are a fan of the Mario and Luigi RPG games, because this is a fun game. And like I said, the story is actually pretty decent too, and some of the side stuff you can do as well. Yeah, there's even a side quest in this game too, where some of them are on a timer, so you probably want to do those as soon as possible before you continue on with the main story. But nonetheless, Mario and Luigi Brothership is my number 9 game of 2024. Number 8, Visions of Mana. This is a beautiful looking game. I'm going to say this right now. I think this is the best looking game that has come out this year in terms of environment and the colors and just how everything just flowed with it. This is a fun game, and I really enjoyed it. You play as Val, who is the guardian of the alms, who the alms are people that have to go sacrifice themselves to the mana tree in order to preserve magic throughout the land and of all the elements. There are some elements that no longer exist because of some circumstances that happened earlier on in the game's lore. So you play as Val, and unfortunately your best friend, who is also kind of your lover, is picked to be the Alm of Fire, since you're both from the same village, and you all go on your pilgrimage to go to the other places to get the rest of the alms, and then eventually you end your journey at the mana tree to sacrifice the alms in order for, you know, the magic to keep flourishing over the world. It is a nice game and a very tragic story in terms of, you know, the sacrifice of who gets picked to be the alms and everything is, you know, it is what it is. But it's a great game. I really don't want to spoil anything too much more about the story because it's a really interesting story and it's a fun little story as well as you are playing through the game, and it gets even more crazy and intense as you continue through it. And in terms of the combat's fairly simple in some aspects. You get into combat and it's you and two of the other characters, and you can switch between who you control with a few button presses, and then you have access to some magic or some abilities that you can use, whether it's like, oh, this skill will lower the enemy's defense, lower their attacks and such, make them slow, make us go faster, so we're able to execute our moves a lot faster as well. And the combat's really nice and it's interesting as well. And then eventually, as you're continuing through the game, you get these artifacts that let your character use a specific skill that is on a cooldown for a while, and that skill could either range from shooting water at them, trapping them in bubbles, so the enemies are trapped in bubbles for a while, and then when you destroy the bubbles, it does more damage. Making a field that makes it so that enemies are slow in that field, that makes you go faster and your skills come back faster as well as you're in the field. And again, eventually those abilities expands on the whole battlefield and such. So it's a really fun and cool aspects of that in terms of like all of those artifacts and how they're used and how they are quite different. And then of course you also have some special abilities as well that eventually you get when a gauge is full. You can do an entire massive attack that hits all the enemies that does some good damage as well. But again, the combat in this game is really fun. I enjoyed it. It's very beautiful, and the voice acting in this game is pretty cool too, not gonna lie. It's really nice and very, very of the time, and the period that they are trying to portray in this as well, where I feel like, yeah, this is how they would be talking in this, and it makes a lot of sense. And again, I just can't say this enough. I think this is still the most beautiful looking game of this series, and the music's really great too. You can't go wrong with the Visions of series or the Mountain series. It's really fantastic. The music is great and it's lovely too. And just exploring the world, seeing all that it has to offer is wonderful. And again, it's a nice little easy platinum of a game too. There might be some challenges here and there because there are a few challenges like, oh, you have to beat this specific boss on hard. So unless you made a save file before you fought that boss and you accidentally fought on a lower difficulty, well, then you have to go through the entire game again because it's a very late boss. And then, of course, there's a secret enemy as well that's kind of hard to fight as well. But the good news is you don't have to fight that enemy on the hardest difficulty. You can fight that enemy on the easiest of difficulties, and it still is going to take some time, but it's still a nice little fun game to play. And Visions of Mana is a fantastic game. I'm very looking forward to hopefully seeing more Mana games in the future because this was a really beautiful and fun game, and that is why it's my number 8 game of 2024. Number 7, Black Myth Wukong. I am honestly surprised of how much I enjoyed this game. It was a really fun game, and not to say that I wasn't going to not enjoy this game, but I feel like the way that, this game is a Souls-like in a way. There are some aspects where it is similar to, the Dark Souls game, but then there's aspects where it's not similar. One of the key points is, when you die, you drop your souls in Dark Souls, and then you have to go retrieve them. In this game, you don't really lose too much, if anything, when you die. You just kind of lose progression from where you died to your last checkpoint, or your last little shrine that serves as your bonfire is. The combat in this game is simple. You have your basic. It's more like it's an action Souls-like games, more so like, where it's not really strategy. I mean, there's some strategy, but it's just a simple, not really a mash, but like, mash, match your attack buttons, do this, do that. You have specific spells you can use, which are pretty cool too. And you have some other tricks up your sleeve where you can transform into some kind of a creature that does a specific move for a while. And, it's really awesome. I will say that is a pretty good of this game for it to having, the spells really works it out. And then, of course, the combat, you can change your style as well to how your pole acts. Like, it was like, oh, hey, this pole is more so for long range in a way, or this pole stance is kind of, up in your face, and this pole stance is, another way. So it's really cool about that too. And then, of course, you have all the stuff that releases from it as well. The story is, I don't want to say it's simple, because it's honestly not. I will say that is somewhat similar to the Souls-like games in the way of, while Dark Souls lore and everything's more so told in the items, Black Myth Wukong's story is told more so in the way of, if you know the story of Wukong, you somewhat know the story. However, this is not the story of Wukong. This is the story that happens after, Wukong's journey to the west, which again is a nice little aspect of it, because you are not playing as Wukong, you are playing as kind of like a reincarnation of him in a way. You actually play as Wukong at the beginning of the game just to see how great it is. However, that's also kind of a negative in a way, because, Wukong is very sassy. He loves, talking back and, having jabs and all that stuff. Very talkative. And the monkey that you play as for the whole game doesn't speak at all. So that's kind of like a negative on the game's aspect, where it's like, oh, we're not playing as Wukong. We don't get to hear some of the sass and everything that he gets to have, which is, kind of a negative, but it's still enjoyable in some ways. So you're journeying through, you're basically somewhat going through Wukong's steps in order to recover parts of Wukong, in order to, help bring about a resurrection and bring about, the story and the legacy of Wukong. And yeah, and also they say this, the environments of the area are great. There's some great music in here as well. Some good boss fights too, and some rage boss fights as well, so you can't really do that. So there are some bosses that make you think like, okay, how do I want to go about this enemy? I can't go about this enemy this way. It has to come about this way. It's still a little fun game as well, and I enjoyed it very well as well, because this is the first game made by this studio, which is fantastic. I am always of the belief that watching a studio's first game come to fruition and it being a great success like this, so I'm very looking forward to seeing what else they have. I know they just released a boss rush for this game not too long ago, which is pretty cool. And I do need to go back into it at some point, just to get everything else. And I heard that they are working on some DLC. I'm curious as to how that's going to work and what it will be about, but still interested. And yes, I did do the secret boss for this as well and got the good, true ending. I don't really know how that really works, but it's a pretty interesting aspect of it as well, which is something you can't do that until you beat the game first. So you have to beat the game, and then you have to go make sure you've did all these other stuff first, and then you go to this one place and you fight this one fight, and then at the end you kind of have a great epic fight, which is really awesome. So I will give them that too. And then you have to go beat the game again, in order to see this last little thing. Yeah, at the end of every chapter, you kind of get a little bit of a backstory to the boss and some of the aspects of, like, maybe some stuff of what Wukong did with this character in the past. And it's very interesting, you know, just a very interesting backstory and some lore on not only the character of Wukong, but also all the characters around him as well and such. And it's a really fun game, so I will give them that. It's very stunning visually. The voice acting, even the dub for it, is really good too. But it's really great, and I enjoyed my time playing this game. But that is why Black Myth Wukong is my number 7 game of 2024. Number 6, Stellar Blade. Very similar to Black Myth Wukong in the way that this is the studio's first game, you know, in their existence, and it's also kind of a good Souls-like game in a way too. And very similar to, you know, Dark Souls and Black Myth Wukong in the fact that when you die, you get sent back to a checkpoint, but very similar to Wukong in a way of when you die, you don't really lose anything as well, which is pretty cool. But this game's done a little bit differently than Black Myth in the fact that, you know, you don't have spells, but you have abilities, and you have, you know, your weapon is a sword, and you have, you know, abilities and other things that you need to do in order to beat enemies as well. The combat for this game is very smooth as well, and I actually enjoyed it too. I know a lot of people goon over Eve, the character that you play as, because of, well, I mean, just look at her. She's stunning. Don't get me wrong. But the combat and the story of this game is what really drove it with me. And not only that as well, but the story behind, you know, how the characters interact. Eve is a robot in the sense that she is sent from outer space to come back down to Earth to help take it back after it's been taken over by some kind of a plague. I can't quite remember what the plague is called, or the, you know, the visitors of whatever other thing that took it over. So majority of the people that you meet here are actually androids, or some people left behind by, you know, the society as a whole and such. And then the way that Eve interacts with these people and everything is just a nice little, you know, it really adds to the environment and the stories for this as well. It is a nice game. It's a fun game. It's not that long of a game either, if I'm being completely honest. And hey, you can beat this game in however you want. It can be, you can play it on easy as well, and makes all the fights not that difficult. Or you can play it on hard and, you know, give yourself a bit of a challenge. And there are challenges in this game, not gonna lie. And again, there is a boss rush for this, which is a pretty cool aspect too. So, not really a boss rush, but like you can go and fight all the bosses again, and you know, you can set parameters like, oh, I want this and this and this and such too. And there's a new game plus too, which is great because this game has some multiple endings. There are 3 endings that this game has, and how you get them can be a bit not hard to understand, but it's a little it could be hard to get one of the endings in general, which is, I would believe, is the true ending. So there are, like I said, there are 3 endings. How you get them is when you get to the end of the game, you'll be given a choice. There's a choice where you have to say yes or no. If you say yes, that's one ending. If you say no, it's a different ending, but that ending changes, depends on how you did something else. If you did some side content and just looked around and did some exploring in general, you would notice that there's a bar on the top corner that does fill up every now and then. If you get that to a specific percentage, I don't think it has to be maxed, but I think it has to be like 80%, or maybe it does have to be maxed. And then when that is maxed, and then when you get to the end and you say no, that's where you get the true ending of the game, which is a really great ending. I will say all the endings are pretty interesting, to say the least. And like I said, the way that Eve carries herself at first, kind of like 2B in a way in the Nier Automata game, where it's like, okay, I gotta focus on the mission, but then she eventually, like, you know, kind of starts thinking for herself in a way. Well, she still thinks about the mission. She's not blindly following the mission. She's now questioning some things, which could be seen as a bad sign in a way, but it's actually a good sign. And then, you know, her just how she interacts with characters as well also changes over time, especially your two companions that are with you through the entire game. It's, well, not the entire game, you do meet one later on in the game, but it's really nice and such. And then how she also interacts with, you know, everyone else in terms of all the people you help, in terms of their own little stories going along the way. And it's really cool. It's a really nice, beautiful game as well. And I will say this, there's a lot of costumes that Eve can wear, and they're all really stunning, don't get me wrong. And yes, there are a lot of, ooh, boy ones. They're like, ooh, hello, and such. But that's a really fun game. It's an enjoyable game. And the story is what really drives it home for me. I really do like the story of this game, too. And again, the combat's really fun, too. You can go around. It's very Devil May Cry-like in a way in terms of the combat, which is really cool. And it's fun, and it's interesting, and I really did enjoy playing this game for what it was and streaming it for you guys. And it's really fun. I know there were some moments where I did rage about it, but you know, at the end of the day, I did manage to beat it. And like I said, I could lower the difficulty, but oh well. But no, it's still a fun game, and I enjoyed it. And as of right now, I believe it's still only on PlayStation. I believe there might be a PC release in the works. I'm not entirely sure, but for now, it is only a PlayStation 5 exclusive. And it's fun as hell, and it's really enjoyable, and I can't wait. This is definitely a developer and game series that I'm very looking forward to seeing what they are doing next, because I can't wait. And Stellar Blade is my number 6 game of 2024. Number 5, Unicorn Overlord. This is a stunningly beautiful game. I mean, it's by Vanillaware, so of course it's going to be a beautiful game, and not to mention the food. Oh my god. But yes, this game is wonderful. This is a wonderful game, and I enjoyed it. It's a very simplistic story, you know. Prince, his kingdom is taken over by a, you know, opposing coup, and then you are run away. You run away with one of your queen, with the queen's, aka your mother's trusted ally. You go away, get strong, so you can take back your kingdom. So it's a very simple story in terms of that, and you go around recruiting a lot of characters as well. You can recruit all the characters, and some of the choices you make are, well, they're very simple, if I'm being honest. It's literally a whole, you do a fight, and then you, at the end of the fight, it's like, oh, kill. It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to kill me? And then it's like, well, then your options are, no, we're not going to kill you. As a matter of fact, how about you join us? Or B, it's like, yes, we're going to kill you. So you can build up your teams a lot differently, but I mean, you would like to see everyone together and such. So, and once you know the ways of the combat, you can definitely find a way to, like, you know, min-max and do a lot of crazy stuff one way or another. Just be like, oh, if I have my one unit tied with this character in this class, with this other character in this class, we can do all these kinds of things. And it's really interesting too. So yeah, the traversal is great. It's similar to Fire Emblem and other games like that in a way. You can actually level up your combatants, and then you can also level up their classes as well. You know, you can change them from a regular knight to a royal knight. You can change them from a paladin or a griffin rider to a griffin master, a dragoon rider to a dragoon master, all that kind of stuff. It's really cool too. Obviously, they need to be at a specific level. You need to have specific stuff, and it's really interesting too. So, in the combat, it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors in a way. You know, it's a whole, like, well, this class is really good against this, like, archers are great against any of the flying classes, because, you know, it just makes sense. And it's like, well, all the flying classes are great against any of the classes that are on horses. So, again, like I said, once you learn how to be like, oh, if I have a class with this, if I have a unit with this, and yeah, you can have units that you can, you know, dispatch along the way as well. So you have your units, and their movement speeds are determined by their leader. And yeah, and you can only have, unfortunately, you can only have like up to 5 characters on a unit, but you can have, front units and back units to really, gauge the enemy and everything on it. It's really fun. And obviously, again, another aspect that's very similar to Fire Emblem is there is, Unity episodes as well, or not Unity, but like, hey, there's rankings, or I can't really remember the right word for it, but it's a whole bonding. Let's just say they're bonding. So yeah, so it's like, oh, these two units have a rank, or they have a B rank, an A rank, or an S rank in terms of bond. And of course, there could be bonding episodes that come out after it. So like your main character can definitely have bonding episodes with everyone. Not maybe some of them aren't as much as other ones, but it's still great. And then of course, I mean, the characters are wonderful and they're beautiful looking too. I mean, Vanillaware is fantastic when it comes in terms of, just their character designs, as well as, again, the food, just the way they make it look. So, Vanillaware and Atlas working together again is a match made in heaven, in my opinion. They did so well with 13 Sentinels, and now they're back again with Unicorn Overlord. It's wonderful, and I honestly can't believe it didn't take them that long to release Unicorn Overlord compared to how long it took them from, I believe, Odin Sphere was their last game before 13 Sentinels came out. 13 Sentinels is a great game. I still highly recommend that, but I also highly recommend Unicorn Overlord as well. It's a nice little strategy-like game, and it's really fun. The story is really good too, and yeah, there could be moments where you might be like, okay, how the hell do I do this? So then you gotta like change up your parties, which kind of sucks in a way, because like, oh, I really like this setup I have, but in order to make this work, I need to like have this character be with this other character, and these characters, move them around and such. It's a really great game, and the combat's fun, and everything about it is wonderful, and I enjoyed this game so much as well. And unfortunately, I know the directors say they don't really plan to make a DLC, or I don't know if they have a plan for a sequel or anything like that, but I still wouldn't mind them to, have something else with this game, because this was a fun game, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. So if anything else does come out about Unicorn Overlord, I am very looking forward to it. And of course, I'm always keeping an eye and ear out for anything Vanillaware related, and of course Atlas related as well. And that's why Unicorn Overlord is my number 5 top 10 games of 2024. Number 4, Little Guardsman. This game is a charming indie game that is a beautiful, beautiful game. Not only in terms of like the graphics and the charm of the characters as well. This is a fun game. It makes you laugh out loud every single time I play this. There's so much humor in this game, and so much sass from Little, the main character. Name's Little. She's wonderful, and it's great. You're basically filling in for your dad as a guardsman for this town here, and kind of like Papers, Please in a way, you have to determine, well, should this person be brought in? Should this person not be brought in? And you have some tools and lifelines to go about, but you only get 3 chances to do anything, and then you gotta figure out, okay, I got 3 chances to do stuff. Okay, what can I do? Well, I have a truth serum, I have a x-ray machine, I can call some resources, even though the calls do help sometimes, but the majority of the time they're not really all that helpful. And then, it's the overall story of this game as well is great. I believe it's you work the guard shift 7 days. There are some night shifts as well that you do it as well, so it's really funny. And then as the story progresses, just a lot of things happening within this kingdom is funny as hell. This, again, the whole characters and the people that try to come in through the town is funny as hell. And then how you determine is, well, okay, it's like, do you let this person in or not? They have all this stuff. Do they have all the right stuff that they need in order to come in? Are they not shady? Are they shady? And you, like I said, you have your abilities to check them in and everything, and determining on, like, okay, do you figure out if they are right or not? And then it's like you get a star rating at the end. It's like, okay, you got like a 3-star rating for this character because you figured out that they should be brought in with the least amount of stuff. Or it's like, well, should this person not be brought in? And then you got a 3-star because you figure out why they shouldn't be brought in. And then there's kind of like a star rating that you get where it's like, well, you got a 2-star rating because yes, they should have been brought in, but you could have learned other things. And then there's another one that's like, well, you only got this star rating even though they should not have been brought in, but you need to find like the reason why kind of thing. You need to find the reason why someone should or shouldn't be coming in order to get the full thing. And it's really funny too. And then eventually like a war breaks out, and then you have to determine, okay, should I draft this person in to be part of the war efforts or not? And then depends on who you draft them in, it determines if your side wins this fight or not. And then at the end of the day, you also get to walk around a little bit outside as well, and it's really cool as well. But there's also another caveat. You do have a reverse button, so you can either reverse the entire day or you could reverse one of the characters as well. So you'd be like, oh shoot, I didn't want to do it that way, so let me reverse to see if I can get a better outcome for this. And yes, unfortunately, you only have a set number of those to use, but again, it's still really interesting. And like I said, the characters are charming in this game as well, and the overall story is hilarious, and just how it all works is wonderful. This is a fantastic little indie game. It came out early in the year too, and I feel like a lot, just because it came out so early in the year, and then not a lot of people really talked about it too much afterwards. However, I love this game. I think this is my favorite indie game that came out this year, and it's wonderful and it's charming. I definitely need to get back into it to platinum it because it's a fun, funny game, and I really enjoyed it. And I hope everyone who does play this game really enjoyed it as well, because it is a great game and it deserves a lot of praise. I will say that this game deserves a lot of praise because it's really great. It's a really fun game, and I hope a lot more people check it out because it's well worth it. And you will fall in love instantly with Little, just from the first onset of like how she interacts with not just her dad but also everyone else, and how sassy she is. She's a joy and just hilarious, and it's wonderful. This game's great, and I highly recommend it. I played this game. I actually did a review on it as well, and it's a wonderful game that everyone should go check out. And that's why Little Guardsman is my number 4 game of 2024. Number 3, Astrobot. Man, Astrobot really hit the head on nostalgia overload, and I loved it. I am all for Astrobot being kind of like the new PlayStation mascot and everything about him. This game is fun. I remember Astro's Playroom. That is a free game that you get when you get a PlayStation 5. I would assume it's also part of PlayStation 5 Pro. I don't know. I would assume. If not, well, that's a mistake on their part. But Astrobot is a great game. Finally, they made like a nice, fully fledged out game. Yes, I know he was kind of like a VR character game as well, because there was like Astrobot's rescue missions. But, you know, VR games, not to say they can't be full-fledged games, but I believe that one for sure wasn't really like a full-fledged game either. Kind of similar to Astro's Playroom. But Astrobot being a full-fledged platform action fun game is wonderful. Very similar to Astro's Playroom in a way, where this game is you're flying through space in a PlayStation 5, and then your ship gets, you know, taken over, and all the people inside the ship get kidnapped or teleported somewhere new. Your ship parts get all discombobulated and are taken out to different places as well. And then it's time for Astro to, you know, make his save, go rescue all the bots, and go rescue the entirety of the mothership's parts, aka the PlayStation 5, which is great. And so you go around, and you can do all these challenges to rescue all the bots, get all the pieces, and, you know, build everything, and then finally go after the final piece that is held by the main villain of this game. It's a fun, charming game. The music of this game is charming as well, and of course Astro is just fun and charming. You know, you can make him wave, you can make him do a little dance. It's great. And then of course, like I said, the PlayStation nostalgia that this game has, which I know a lot of people are like, oh, this is just one giant, you know, PlayStation PR, not PR, but just one giant PlayStation circle jerk or whatever. But like, it's a fun game regardless. It's still a fun game. And yes, it's great to see, you know, some of the, you know, old characters that Sony has properties of and just haven't done jack shit with them still in here. It's a wonderful experience, and I enjoyed this game so much. Going around some of the levels, trying to rescue all the bots, you know, doing all the puzzles, and all this, you know, all the power-ups you get. There's a power-up where you turn into a mouse. There's a power-up where you get, like, frog gloves. There's a power-up where you got a dog on your back who kind of serves as, like, kind of like a boost in a way, and a monkey, and so many other little power-ups that you can get along the way is fantastic. And like I said, you know, you have all the other bots that are dressed as, you know, classic PlayStation characters, even though there are some in here that are still out there. It's crazy that there's no Final Fantasy bot yet. There's no, you know, so many things. But it's great to see some of the new characters as well. Like, you have Kiryu from the Like a Dragon / Yakuza games. You have the Persona characters as well. And, of course, some of the old ones as well. You have the Legends of Dragoon. They just added Tomba. They added Gex. Some Dark Cloud. Old Tekken characters. You know, you have classic ones like Last of Us. And Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. Resident Evil guys. You know, it's just so amazing seeing all of the bots that this game has, and just kind of like going back in time to be like, oh my gosh, look at all these characters. Like, there's Sly, there's Jak and Daxter, there's Ratchet and Clank. There's so many, just nostalgia overload in terms of this game, and it's a wonderful game. And I will say this game winning Game of the Year at the Game Awards was probably the best thing to ever happen, because the speech that the developers made, Team Aspo, are wonderful, and the speech that they made at the end, be like, hey, don't forget where you came from. Don't, you know, people want to play games. Yes, we would love, you know, these big budgeted games, but those can't be the only things you guys made. One of the things I think I don't really love this, because it really sucks that, you know, the team behind them, you know, I will always feel for the team behind games like this, but I will never feel bad for the people in the big spots up top. Concord. Sony invested so much money into Concord, and that did not even, like, it lasted less than a week, or maybe a little over a week. And then a few days later, Astrobot came out and was a massive success. It was a massive success. Sony didn't even bother really, like, you know, advertising it. I believe Astrobot was, like, announcing, like, the first state of play that happened this year. Or actually, was it announced the same state of play as Concord? I can't remember. Either way, whenever it was announced, it was like, oh yeah, here, Astrobot's having its own little game. And then, like, Concord had this big, massive trailer, which, don't get me wrong, I liked the trailer for Concord. I was like, oh, that looked pretty cool. And then literally the next thing that popped up was like, Concord is a new 5v5 hero shooter. And I'm like, all right, I'm done. I don't care anymore. Yeah, nope, I don't care. Get out of here. I don't care. But with Astrobot now coming out and being this massive success, I hope it opens up Sony's eyes, opens up a lot of game companies' eyes to be like, hey, let's go back to what our roots were. You know, PlayStation have so many IPs that they haven't done anything with. They can go in there and, you know, they don't have to be big budget, ultra realistic game looking that costs billions of dollars. It can still be a simple game as it was years ago. And again, there's nothing wrong with, you know, hey, let's push the games to their limits or whatever. Nothing wrong with that, but don't let that be your main and only focus. You have so much other things that you can do, and Astrobot really proved that can do that, and everyone will love it. Everyone loves Astrobot so much. Even some of the people that didn't even play Astrobot, it's like, yeah, there you go. It's a wonderful game. Really good back to form of being a good old platforming, good old, you know, just a relaxing game to just sit and play and whatever, and fun for the whole family. Just the massive Astrobot sweep that it had at the Game Awards was probably the best thing to ever happen, and I loved Astrobot start to finish. I enjoyed every little aspect of this game. Just the nice little puzzles, and of course the characters, and just everything that it has. Astrobot is a great game, deserves to be in everyone's top games of this year, and is my number 3 game of 2024. Number 2, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. This is the 8th game in the Yakuza series, or 9th if you want to count Yakuza 0. I kind of forgot about that one in some aspects, but this is the 8th. This is technically Yakuza 8 or Like a Dragon 8, as the second game that involves Ichiban Kasuga and his group of friends that we met in the previous game. It is a sequel to that game. A few years after the events of that game, Ichiban's at work, at Hello Work. You know, he's having a time of his life. You know, he's with friends, and he's trying to get into a relationship as well. But, however, not everything goes according to plan, and some of his past comes and bites him back in the ass. And then he learns that his mother's still alive, and then he makes his way to Hawaii, and a lot of Yakuza hijinks just ensues, and I love this game. I am never not going to love a Yakuza game. This game is fantastic. It really did improve a lot from the first game. I will say, while I enjoyed the story of both Infinite Wealth and Like a Dragon, Yakuza Like a Dragon, I'm just going to say 7 and 8, or Yakuza 7, Yakuza 8, because the titles aren't long. I enjoyed both of them, and the stories for both of them are fantastic. I will say Yakuza 7 story kind of just nudges a little ahead in terms of the story for me personally, because while Yakuza 8's story was great and I loved it, there was a lot of kind of like, wait a minute, there's some questions that I feel like still need to be answered that didn't really get answered in the end here. Now, granted, there's another Yakuza game coming out early this year. Will that answer them? Probably not. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's like, oh, there's just something still here that's like, wait a minute, that don't make sense. So, like I mentioned before, Ichiban is, living his life, but then stuff happens, and he's back at rock bottom again. He learns that his mother's alive. He goes to Hawaii, and then a lot of hijinks happen. Ichiban meets some new friends there, and meets an old friend as well. And again, it's great, and this story is going to have you tear up with some spoiler alerts ahead with Kiryu and all the stuff that he goes through as well. Kiryu learns that he's dying, and he doesn't have that much left to live, and he's not even trying to, help himself. He's doing what he's always done, and that's help other people as well. And, he wants to finish this one mission that he has left with his group as well. And just everything that around Kasuga and Kiryu's relationship, what they go through together, what they go through separately with other people. It's a wonderful, wonderful time. And like I said, this game does expand, or really does improve on the combat, as similar to, Yakuza 1 and 2 had, or not Yakuza 1, Yakuza 7 had. And it does expand out. It just feels a little bit better to play in terms of the combat. Not to take anything away from 7 at all. 7's combat was really fun as hell, and it was great. It expands on so much of the side stuff as well that was there. You have that school where you can go to improve some of your stats. The Sujimon make a major comeback in a majorly different way, which is great and fantastic. And it's actually a Sujimon side story, which is fantastic. You have a whole kind of island adventure thing in a way, which is kind of like the Ichiban confections subplot that happens, but this one's much more expansive, much more major, much more chaotic. Hilarity ensues, and it's just all around fun, and it's really enjoyable. And this game is a blast. I love this game start to finish. Everything about it, all the side stories that show up there are great too. I will always say this, the dub is really good too. If you want to play it in English, you can play it in English. If you want to play it in Japanese, you can play it in Japanese. Nothing wrong with that. It's great. And the way that the Hawaii map expands, and as it is fantastic. All the side stuff that it has, like you go around playing as a food delivery stunt person. It's great. It's just, what more? I can gush about this game so much. The message behind it, kind of like, as funny as it was like, oh my god, like how social media and just stuff taken out of context, and how things shown in one way and not in the way that actually happened can really damage someone's reputation or damage someone's image in a way that has major consequences for them. And unfortunately, sometimes the people who did those for them don't really face those consequences. It's funny too that there's a VTuber in this game as well. Like, that's kind of like, it's so crazy how like VTubing really kicked off, late into 2023 or early 2023, and then, kind of has really come to a head. And then it's like, there you go, we got a VTuber in 2020 in a game in 2024 like this. It's really great. I loved it. The combat, the story, just all the classes come back. There's some classic classes. There's some, some of the classes that were in the previous game coming back, and some of the new classes as well. And how you get them, how things unlock is fantastic, and just everything about the karaoke in this game's great as well. You got some classic songs that came back from some of the old Yakuza games, some new ones, and everything about it is fantastic. It's a wonderful, wonderful time, wonderful, wonderful experience. I love this game so much. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is a wonderful game. I can't wait to see what RGG Studios does next. I can't wait to see how basically Yakuza Gaiden 2, which is what this is, if they will release another Yakuza game later this year. I mean, they have this Project Sentry game that they're working on as well, and what they can do next. I'm very curious. I can't wait to see what's next for Kasuga and the game, and just everything in general about this. It's fun as hell, and I loved it so much, and that's why Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is my number 2 game of 2024. Number 1, Metaphor ReFantazio. Surprise, surprise! The Atlas fanboy made an Atlas game his number 1 game of the year again. Last year, whenever 13 Sentinels came out, that was my top 10 game, even though that technically wasn't an Atlas game. Atlas had a part of it. Persona 5 was my top 10 game of 2017, and now Metaphor is another number 1 game of the year. But can you blame me? Metaphor ReFantazio is a beautifully crafted, very good storytelling game of fantasy and reality, and how everything blends together. This is definitely Atlas's magnum opus. I will say that right now. There's a little bit of everything that Atlas has done in the past, almost everything that Atlas has done in the past in this game, and it is great. I know a lot of people say like, oh, this is basically Persona 6. No. This is not Persona 6. This is not going to be Persona 6. Persona 6 is a game on its own that, unfortunately, a lot of people are probably going to compare that to Metaphor here, but for now, Metaphor ReFantazio is a great game. You play as an elder child, which is kind of like the 9th race that is kind of like the race that no one really cares about in this world of 8 overarching races of, different species of different of cultures and everything that they all have. And you're on a mission to help find information to help save the Prince of the Kingdom after he was greatly cursed by the main villain of this game, Luis. But cursed how? Who had the hand in it? Luis was obviously had a hand in everything, because just how Luis is structured. Luis in general is probably the best villain ever written by Atlas, and is not a fair competition at all. Luis himself is he's so blunt, and he's like so forward with everything. He's like, yeah, of course I did this thing. When people ask him, like, yeah, of course I did this. This is the reason why this country has been turned into, everything is like, there's a threat. There's a looming threat of the humans. Humans are basically giant monsters, depicted by this old artist's art style, which is fantastic because Atlas mentioned like, oh yeah, he was definitely an inspiration for all this stuff, and you know, had a hand in all that thing. You know, obviously not the arts himself, but like, you know, just the inspiration that he left in terms of the design of all these enemy types and such is wonderful in a way. So that's obviously just the art direction of the term of all the enemy types. The characters are all beautiful looking. The story is really good too. And I said before, this game has a lot of past everything that Atlas has done. The combat is more akin to the Shin Megami Tensei press turn system does than the regular, you know, turn-based of Persona, where obviously, like, you know, Persona is a turn-based game. You know, this is still technically a turn-based game as well, but the press turn in the whole aspect of like, oh, if you hit an enemy's weakness, you get an extra turn. Oh, if you do this and do that, so many things. And then of course, you know, the enemies also have all that on you as well, but it's a whole like, all right, your one side goes first and then the next side goes first. But then you have these things called archetypes, which is kind of similar to Persona in a way, but it's also very similar to the Digital Devil Saga way, in that those characters became the devils, the devils that, you know, you come back. The archetypes are all classes of specific heroes with all their own skills and such, and as you unlock them, everyone can equip and get all the skills from all the archetypes as well, and it's very nice. All your party members are there as well. You have the follower system, which is very similar to the social link system in Persona. You have some social statuses, which is very similar to Persona again. There's just a lot of things in this game that's wonderful. The music, oh my god, the music of this game is fantastic as well. You go from the battle theme of the rapping monk to just some of the overworld themes, and one of my favorite tracks is definitely one of the late game dungeon areas, which is fantastic and beautifully done, and it's great. The story is, it's a very simple story. You know, it starts off simple. You know, it's an Atlas game where it starts off simple, but then everything kind of like escalates as it goes through. So the king's dead. During the king's funeral, you know, Luis is going for the throne. This other person's going for the throne. But then there's this king's magic comes about and says like, no, this is what's gonna happen. My untimely demise, because he planned this out, is like, with my untimely demise, we are now basically having the whole world is going to determine who's the king by popular, you know, things and all that stuff. And then it's kind of like a competition, even though the competition isn't really like, oh, whoever wins the competition is going to be king. No, it's still is determined by whoever has the most support of the people of this world. And of course, it's very, God, it's very parallel to stuff going on in our world as well, where it's like, oh my god, you know, Luis is like such an asshole, he does all this shit, how can people support him? But then it's like, well, because the reason why he's doing these things is because of this and that, so that's why people are supporting him. It's because of all that stuff. So it's really, really great in that aspect of like how, you know, it brings out your emotions and everything, and the terms of like the anxiety that everyone has, and how their archetypes are made of anxiety made strength, and your awakenings that they have. The most beautiful awakening, I think it was by the main character. I mean, they've all had great awakenings as well. Stroll's is definitely one of my favorites too. You have the characters, you have some of the later characters as well, have great you know, awakenings to their power. And it's just great. And the followers are all fantastic. Unlike in Persona, there's only 8 ranks, and the good news about those is that the rankings automatically go up in terms of every time you hang out with someone. Like, they will always go up. Doesn't matter what you picked in before. So it's like, oh, all the options you pick, it doesn't matter. You just get a little bit of a bonus of a mag. So there's like 2, you know, currencies. There's, you know, the main money currency, and then there's Meg, which is what helps you unlock more archetypes, unlocks more abilities, and everything else that comes with it. And it's just great. And again, the combat is also great, and there's overworld combat, and there's like, you know, main combat. In the overworld, you can just run around and just whack enemies, you know, to defeat them. You get not as much experience as you would in the main battles, but you still get some experience and some money and everything about that. Your archetypes leveling up. they only level up to rank 20. You max those out, and then you can go change another one. But if you keep an archetype on, and when they hit their next rank, they give you an item that gives archetype experience, which is great. So there's multiple ways to go about the combat of this game and such. The dungeons of this game are pretty good too. They're all very different in a way as well, and they're great, and just the characters in general are fantastic. I can definitely see this game does have, you know, unfortunately, somewhat similar to a lot of the old Atlas games, this game does have a slow start, I would say, comparatively. I would say the game doesn't really fully start until after you've completed the first dungeon, and then afterwards it's like, okay, things are now like being set into motion, because that's when the main focus of the game goes to the tournament for the throne, is after the events of the first dungeon. So it takes a while to get there, but there's still some intrigue going on beforehand too. So it's not like, oh, it's so boring until that part comes out. No, there's still a lot of stuff going there. This game's fantastic. You don't have a full silent protagonist. He's still silent in the fact that he doesn't speak as much as, you know, one would like, but when you pick an option, he actually like says the words that you picked, but then also includes some of the words, and then everything else about it, like just the cutscenes that play close to the end are fantastic. The main character is great. I actually really liked it. The cast of characters, the great thing about the cast of characters here, I think they're all fairly new voice actors, or fairly, you know, new to Atlas games. I mean, obviously Stroll's voice actor was Dion's voice actor in Final Fantasy 16. I'm sure there's, you know, some familiar voices here and there as well, but overall, Metaphor ReFantazio is great. I'm very looking forward to this. The director of the game has said that he would love to make this into a series. He just needs to figure out how to make a series. He needs to figure out how to make a sequel and everything like that. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I really am looking forward to this, because Metaphor ReFantazio is a fantastic game. I think everyone should experience it. There is a demo out, so I say go pick up that demo if you're at all curious about, you know, the combat, or, you know, just how the story takes place, and just a little bit of the demo there. You can still get a feel for it, and, you know, it's just wonderful. It's a great experience, and like I said, I think everyone should experience this. Play the demo, and if you really love the demo, which I'm pretty sure you will, if you are a fan of Persona games, you will end up liking this game. And then, you know, get the game for yourself, and then just realize how different it is compared to Persona, and how wonderful it is. So that's why Metaphor ReFantazio is my #1 game of 2024. Well, there it is, guys. That's my top 10 games of 2024. Are you surprised by what I had on this list and what I didn't have on this list? Don't worry. All the games that I did not mention will be talked about in my honorable mentions list that will be coming out tomorrow for you guys. And like I said, this was a really good year for games. A lot of games that came out that were highly anticipated and long overdue, and just wonderful overall. And I cannot wait to see what 2025 has for us in store. There's already some great games coming out early in these first 3 months, and I can't wait for it. And of course, there's, you know, stuff later down the line as well, stuff that hasn't even been announced that's going to come out later this year too. We have a new game console that'll be coming out, the Switch 2, which is going to be very interesting to know when that comes out, when and if that comes out this year, which I'm assuming it is. Just anything about that, we're going to be spoiled, to say the least, and I can't wait. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what 2025 has in store. So, but let me know, guys, what did you think was your favorite game of this year? What would you categorize in your top 5, your top 10, whatever? I know everyone's list is going to be different. Like I said, mine didn't include some big games because just of my criteria of, you know, remakes and remasters not being on here. I know a lot of people's #1 game was probably Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I can't blame them. It's a fantastic game with everything that was in that game, but just the way I was doing things is like, you know, Rebirth unfortunately doesn't fall into that category of being part of this, and I will talk about Rebirth, you know, in my honorable mentions for sure. So it's definitely high up there on my list of like, yeah, this game's great. So I love all the games I played this year. They're fantastic, and I can't wait to talk more about some of these games in my honorable mentions video. And of course, I can't wait to see what is coming up next in the world of gaming. Hopefully, you know, we have some positivity in terms of, you know, studios and no massive layoffs. The strike is still going on. There's still that voice actor video game strike going on too as well. So that's always something to keep an eye out. You know, gotta support them, gotta support everyone in these times of needs and such. So I hope that, you know, it all comes together so that we can keep enjoying these games that we love to play and that the people love to make for us as well. So again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.